All right, we had a good class yesterday. Which a particular class I have a marvelous teacher, and maybe he's not even a marvelous teacher. I just like to do because the funny thing happened. I had an argument with him in class actually about Andrew Jackson. Now he's a Jacksonian. Thinks Andrew Jackson was an amazing historic figure, and actually in a way he was to a particular class and race of people. He was for the people who enjoy and get to participate in American democracy. He was for Southern economy that helped the country become the economic miracle it is. He was as far as a military strategist. He was in the War of 1812 when Europe came back to come up through the Mississippi River through Louisiana to attack and reclaim the country. He was able to figure out how to cut them off and get to the right place and use the strategic positioning of the geography to compensate for his very much so outnumbered military. He was also the biggest slave owner in the country. He was also a direct benefactor of the land that was taken from Native Americans, which is why he was so interested in taking it, because not only did he take land for himself, but he flipped it. He was the original flip this house. He not only had the ability to take the land, but when he took the land, he had the ability to sell the land to the rich plantation owners that wanted to expand into the East. Now this has turned into a Jacksonian thing, but I didn't want it to. But the reason why that was so important, that expansion was so important, is because what I didn't know was that cotton is very hard on the soil, and they didn't know about rotating where you plant it. So they needed fresh area to keep that cotton industry going, which revitalized not only the Southern economy, but it kept revitalizing Europe that was basically material bound, and all of the materials that were coming from the United States produced new resources for Europe. So for the world, he was a great figure. But slavery, land taken from Native Americans, the Trail of Tears, the hypocrisy of not just democracy, where everybody, women, Native Americans, Mexicans, blacks, were not allowed to participate, when they said all people. You know, he just had a lot of folks. Plus he was an idiot. You know, he got in duels. He was a tough guy. He held grudges. Look at the history between him and Davy Crockett. Dude really held a grudge. He messed up a lot of people's lives. So, but the particular debate he and I had 3-4 minutes into this tape is about the Trail of Tears, where he had said, oh, this is not genocide, and I went in on it. And he said, well, no, it was actually it was a poor government action. And I pointed out how strategic and meticulous Jackson was in defending the United States for the war in 1812, but suddenly he doesn't have sense to get Native Americans, A, from one point to another, B, he was making them leave. It wasn't like it was no hookup. You don't say, okay, that's your land over there, move. No, that's not right. So we're having this debate, and I'm looking at the History Channel. Boom. They're talking about Andrew Jackson. So I'm looking and like, oh, I'm going to get my information together so I can go back and get this guy, which I shared this with him in class, because they was wrong, still is wrong. But on this History Channel episode, I'm watching it, he is on it. My professor is on. I'm like, dude, you the man. So he's just like one of those, like when you pay for something, you have in your mind a picture of what you're going to get. If I had a picture in my mind of the history professor, that's him. So, I mean, it's just like he's cool with it. I like him. So, last night we were talking about the neo-leftists, historians. And this was coming about in 1959 as to where the quote-unquote scholars had begun to realize that the United States is an imperial body. And he was saying, like, you know, wow, this is just, you know, mind-blowing at this time that these people have come up with this. You know, we don't know what made their ingenious minds turn to these facts. And I'm like, so you never heard of Martin Delaney? You never heard of W.E.B. Du Bois? You've never heard of any of the, you know, Native Americans have been talking about the imperialism of the United States. Mexicans have been talking about the imperialism of the United States. Black folk, W.E.B. Du Bois of everybody was the closest to what they would have to admit being a scholar. Now they said we don't want to let your work in the mainstream, but they read it. They knew who he was. Even Booker T. Washington did boost the white supremacist status quo, but it was always meant to illustrate the opposite for a change to come about. He felt that white people were good, and that once they saw that they were wrong, that they would do better. I'm going to leave that where that is. But even in the way that he was promoting the status quo, it was under the guise that change would come when the oppressor recognized his wrong ways. So, I'm asking him, why is this seen as some pillar of revelation? And he said, well, those people weren't considered scholars, and Native Americans weren't writing, and Mexicans weren't writing. I had to let it go because it was class, and I think I was irritating him. But, and usually I'm good for an irritation, but like I said, I like this dude, and I'm really not trying to mess his classes up. Sometimes, you know, I can tell when he's interested, and I can tell when he's not, and, you know, my job is not to prove myself to him. My job is to drop it and see who picks it up, you know. And when the people pick it up, I know who wants to know more. And if you don't want to know more, it's not my job to change your life. But I wish I could remember the name of this. Well, we were talking about Oshinsky. That's one thing that's really, really big in historian scholarship, is that you have to know who had what thought, which is a really Eurocentric idea, because our thoughts technically are not ours. Now I'm getting into philosophy, but our thoughts are not ours. If you want to test if your thoughts are yours, what are you going to be thinking next? You don't know. The thought that comes in your mind just appears. It just happens. You didn't create that thought. And if the thoughts were yours, why do you forget stuff? It passes through. It's like breathing. You don't think about breathing. You just breathe. It's like your cells dividing. You don't think about your cells dividing. You don't think about your hair growing. These things just happen. But again, that's not philosophy. But in his mind, these people were not scholars who was saying that the United States was an imperialist entity. And my question to him is, what's a scholar? Because the bottom line to it, and I'm running out of time, is a scholar is denoted by the United States when an institution under the control of an imperialist body says you are.